we're going to talk about the appropriate way to write a function to handle cin reading integers from the keyboard. We're going to go back and relate this to the homework problem on the coin die simulation. Right, in that homework problem, we're going to give the user an opportunity to choose whether or not they want to simulate tossing a coin, flipping a coin over and over, or rolling a die and generating some summary statistics about that. So we want to actually give the user a menu, right? In that problem, we said we wanted to display a main menu, and we gave some choices about what's to be in the menu. I've written a function here called display main menu. It does not require any parameters. When we call it, all we want this function to do, its only purpose is just simply to display this menu. It's not going to read any data in, it's just going to print out some information to the console, and therefore it will return nothing, so its return type is void. So in here we can see that this will just print out these three menu choices. It will print out a last message telling the user to enter some menu number. Right. What we want to concentrate on in this video is how we handle getting user input from the keyboard, especially in a function. Right. We've been writing all our code in main for a while, but we want to write functions to do that. So I want to write a function called get main menu input. Right up here in comments, I've given a description. I've said I'm going to use cin to read integer input. Right, there's no parameter. So when I call this function, I don't need to pass it anything, but the function does need to return to me the integer value that it read from the keyboard. Right, we're using cin to do this. We want to make sure that when we get done with this function, we leave cin, that input stream object, in a good state, meaning that if some other function needs to use cin later, that the flag bits, everything's in a good state, and we have not left any garbage in the input stream. So we need to take care of all of that in this function. Right. Now what we're going to do is I've got some pseudocode here. Right. The actions we want to perform in this function is we're going to control displaying the menu, which we'll call our function display main menu to do that. We're going to read user input. Right. And then we want to check to make sure that cin did not fail to read that input. Right, we'll see that if the user types something that's non-numeric, a non-integer value, cin, the fail bit will be set. And we don't want to return from our function until we have read in an integer value. Right. So we'll go through this loop here that says while cin fails to read an integer, we're going to display an error message. We're going to clear the cin stream flags. We're going to remove bad data from the input stream. We're going to then redisplay the menu to let the user, to give the user those same choices again. We'll try to read the user input. That's the end of this particular while loop here. Right? We'll loop back up if we've gone through this, since we've just read the user input, and we'll check the stream state again. We will stay in this loop until the user types in some good integer input. In that case, then this will no longer be true. We will have successfully read an integer. But before we return from our function, we still have the enter key press out in the stream that cin failed to read. And if the user typed any other extra data in the stream, we want to remove that, right? We're telling the user that when you call our function, when it comes back, if you were to use cin again, we have cleared garbage out of that stream state. You won't have any undue consequences in your program because there's garbage out there. We have totally cleared out that stream. After we do that, we will then return the user input. So that's key here, is we need to leave cin in a good state for any other function that needs to use it. All right. So let's then call our get main menu input from main. So down here in main, right, I'm just going to then create a variable called choice. And we're going to set choice equal to get main menu input is the name of our function. It doesn't require any parameters. Actually, maybe I'll just call this menu choice here. Maybe that's a slightly better name. Either one's fine with me right now. All right, so if we were to build this, right, and run it, we would call this function. So our control would be transferred up here. Let's start writing the code now that needs to go in here. Display menu. Well, we'll call the display main menu function. Right. So that function, display main menu, doesn't return anything, so we just call that. Right, we're going to try to read user integer input. So let's create then a variable. I'm going to call this choice. We'll use cin to do that. And that value is named choice. Now, I did include IOStream up here, so it's understanding, right, what cin is and what C is out down here. Right. So let's write our while condition. So while cin fails. So while standard cin dot. So we'll call the fail flag. If that returns true, right, we know that this is failed to read. And so our action then, when that happens, is we're going to display an error message. So we could use cout, or we could use the C error stream. All right. Error, right? Failed to read. So I'm going to say error, non-integer input. Just going to make it kind of a terse menu at this, or terse message at this point. All right, now we need to clear the cin stream flags. We do that by calling cin dot clear, right? That doesn't. All right. Now we want to remove bad data from the stream. We use cin.ignore to do that. All right. Now, how much data do we want to remove, and what is our delimiter? All right. I should pop up my example so I get the limit correct. Bear with me. Sorry about this. All right, numeric limits. All right, so we want numeric limits, and actually in order for this to recognize this, we have to include the limits library, stream size. All right. We're just going to call the max, say, remove the maximum amount, do that, but stop when you find the enter key press, right, as the delimiter. And let's see, I need to make sure that we have included limits here for that. All right. So what this is going to do, ignore, basically there's a pointer in there. It's just going to skip over all of this data, so you can think of removing it or clearing it from the stream. So the next time we read, basically it's going to move along in that input stream until it encounters a new line character. It will actually then remove the new line character as well and be ready to read the next thing that comes into our stream. But there should, since enter key press is used to return from cin, there should be nothing in the stream after that. Right, now we want to, right, display the menu again. We'll call display main menu. And we need to now read the user input. again before we loop back up and test cin.fail. Choice, got my operator, right? I need the extraction operator. And that's the end of that while loop. I had that operator incorrect up there. All right, so now, right, when we get to this point in the program, this is where we said we want to remove the enter key press and any other data from the input stream. Well, we simply call this ignore function again. Right. And if all that's in there is the enter key press, that's all that'll be removed. But if there's other garbage, that'll be removed as well. Finally, we want to return user input. And our user input, right, is stored in choice. So we'll return choice here. And that's what we do in this function, right? So that when we leave, we know that cin is in a good state and that the user does not have to worry about us having left cin in a bad state, right? Next time they go to use it, or the user would be any other function in this program that needs to use cin. Right, let's see if we can just build this now. And I've got an error. Oh, display main menu identifier not found. Well, okay, that's because I defined this function after the. So I'm trying, so it's complaining, right? I'm trying to call this function here, but it's not been defined until down here. So since I didn't use prototypes, let's throw in function prototypes. And now, right, I'm declaring that function. Throw this one in as well. All right. All right, so now I'm declaring this function here. Remember, the compiler starts from the top, works its way down. So now when it sees this, it will have already been declared. The compiler won't have seen the code, but it will already have said, oh, I've seen that. I know that needs to be defined somewhere else. Right. So it will be able to handle it. All right, so now our build succeeded. Let's just go ahead and use the debugger to step through this. So I'm going to put my cursor here, right click and say run to cursor. All right, so it's sitting here waiting to run this function now, right? Remember F11, so if I go to the debug menu, I want F11 step into, because I actually want to go into the main menu input. If I chose step over, it would just execute that code and not let me see it go through the states. All right, so here we are at the start of main menu input. I'm just going to hit F10, right? You can see then here in this function, our variable choice, our local variable, just has some garbage data in it. I'm just going to hit, well, if I hit F11, right, we'll step into the main menu function. So here, right, now if I just hit F10, this is just going to execute the cout statement. So if we look at our console window, this is what's sitting on the cout statement at this, or sorry, this is what's sitting in output at this point, right? My yellow cursor's here. I've not finished that function, so I'll hit F10, right? Ended that function, went back, right? We called that function from here, so it came back to where to call it from. That information stored out in memory on the call stack, so it knows where to come back. And now we're ready to execute this line of code. So if I hit F10, right, step over saying, I want you to execute the cin, or operation. So now it's waiting for me to enter a menu number. In this case, let's actually purposely make it fail. I'm just going to type a capital R and hit the enter key. And so now if I hit F10, cin.fail should be true. Yes, it was. You can see our flow of execution. That was true. So we're in here ready to execute this next one. Oh, what I also want to point out is remember when cin fails, it stores a value of 0 in here. Right? We don't want to return that value. If we had just said, hey, whether this failed or not, let's return the value we got. Well, we're not doing the user any favor because we have not guaranteed that we successfully read an integer from the keyboard, right? That's what we said we do. So we don't, this is why we need to do this. Just returning that value of 0 would end up leaving CN in a bad state. We wouldn't be doing our job. All right, so I'm going to hit F10. All right, when I hit F10 here, all right, we can see then that this error message popped up, error, non-integer input. All right, F10 here, this clears the flags. F10, what that does now is because it failed to read, so if I pop this up, this had failed to read this capital R in the enter key press. Right? If we weren't then telling it to ignore that information, it would come back around again and try to read the same thing over and over and just keep failing. We need to have that ignore in here. If you don't believe me, comment out this ignore, see what happens, right? That's the best way to learn. That's how I learned all of this, is by playing with this and seeing what happened in every different scenario. You're getting a shortcut here with me explaining this, but you really should play with all these. Turn these things on and off, see what's happening, right? To really understand why this is being handled and the way it's being handled. All right, so now we want to display the main menu again. I'm just going to hit F10 so it does that. All right, F10 again to prompt it to read our choice. So now we can see then we've got this in the console. It redisplayed the main menu. All right, and it's now waiting for our choice. Well, again, if we were to type something bad, we would loop back through. So let me just type, I'm going to type T10, hit the enter key, hit F10. You can see that fail is going to be true because that T was a non-integer character. Right? If I just cycle back through all of this and pop up the console again here, right, you can see now our menus appeared for the third time. Eventually, we'll probably want to do some cleanup by clearing the screen so we don't have this scrolling sort of mess. We give the user a nicer presentation. That's an extra at this point. We just want to understand how this is working. All right, so now let me enter a menu number. Right, so I can enter a menu number of 1, hit the enter key. Right, hit F10. This should be false now. CN should not have failed to read that. It was false. So now we come down here, and here's the important step. What's in the buffer right now is that enter key press. Ignore is going to remove that. There's no other garbage that I type. You can see the choice here in our local memory is 1. If I hit F10, we cleared out that stream. We're going to return choice, F10. Now that we're back in main, if I hit F10, that's going to populate menu choice now with the number 1 that function returned. All right, so now that we're back here, we've guaranteed the user that we've read an integer, right, and that the stream, the CN stream, is in a good state. Now, we have not guaranteed the user that we've read a value that's within the valid range. Right? So in this particular case of our main menu, we want a valid range. All right, we want a valid range of 1 to 3. Let me stop the debugger here. Let's go back through this idea as well. All right, I'm going to do a run to cursor. Let's go back through here. I'm going to hit F11, F10, so it just displays the menu. It prompts us for our choice. All right. So again here, if the user were to type 77, this is a valid menu choice. Right, hit the enter key, F10, CN's in a good state. We're just going to remove that enter key press. You can see the choice here, right, actually has then the number 77. Hit F10, we get back to main. You can see then the get main menu input returns 77. If I hit F10 here, it completes the assignment. So menu choice 77. All right, so then back in main, we would want to have something else that validates whether or not that's within the range we want. Maybe back in main, maybe some other function. It depends on your application. Right, the purpose of this function was simply then here was to validate that CN was working correctly. All right. So now back in main, like I said, we can have some other structure that validates whether or not that's a good menu choice. And one other thing then as well, right? let's validate this. Let's just back here in main, and let's just say, let's make a constant. So let's just say constant quit program equals 3. That's the user's quit choice. So we could have something now that says, we can still get the menu choice. And we can say while menu choice not equal to quit program, let's now handle the menu choice. I'm going to use the switch structure. I'm going to say switch on menu choice. Case 1 would be flip coin. And from now, I might just say flip coin or coin flip chosen. All right, so I'm just creating a very simple structure that I can test without writing everything else. Case 2. This is roll die chosen. All right, we need the break. Remember, on the after each case, if we don't put the break, it will fall through. And then if anything else is returned, here's where my default case could say something like, let's print out what the menu choice value is an unknown choice. All right, this should handle when our user does some things that are out of range. So let's go ahead and rebuild this. All right, and put my cursor here. All right, right click, run to cursor. All right, so I'm going to enter a valid menu number 1, hit the enter key. All right, back here in main, you can see that the menu choice is 1. So this should be true, not equal to quit program. All right, F10, we're going to switch on menu choice. So switch on 1, this should go to case 1. Hit F10. All right, this should pop up console. So here, all right, you can see that it now said coin flip chosen. Right. They hit F, so transfer back over here, hit F10 again. All right, now it's down at the end of my while loop. If you spotted hopefully my logic error by now, because I hit F10, it goes back up here and says, well, menu choice not equal to quit program. Well, menu choice is still 1. So before we go back up to the start of our while loop, we need to prompt the user for the next menu choice. So let's stop this and let's add that code. I'll just simply then call that functionality. And let's run it and check our logic. All right, so the number 1, enter. All right, so now F10, you can see it returned the number 1. We're going to switch on 1. This should print out coin flip chosen. So let me pop open the console. We can see that did. All right, now here, right, if I hit F10, right, it's going to prompt us for our next menu choice. Let's just choose 2 to test that functionality. Hit the enter key, F10, right, while menu choice not equal to quit program. Well, it won't be, it's on 2. So we're going to come down to case 2. We're going to print out roll dice chosen. We're going to get the next menu choice. So you can see it printed out roll die chosen. And it's up here getting the next menu choice. Let's do 3, which is a valid menu choice. F10. Now this should be equal to quit program. That was true. We come out of our while loop. Main is done executing, return 0. Right. So we put this control structure in main, right, which controls when our program ends. It's then printing out, in this case, what these actions should be. This is where you would add code, say to call the coin flip function, call the roll die function, right? We didn't test our default case, so we could enter an invalid value as well if we're running the program. So let's do that, run the cursor. See, these are all the things you should do to test your program. All right, so what happens if I type that 77? Well, we're back here, we got the 77. We're gonna switch on 77. That's not one of our cases. It comes down to default, right? Pops up. This message 77 is an unknown choice, and right, it would just then prompt the user to enter another choice. In F10, right, enters another choice. So now what if the user enters a good choice, but they type 1 ABC for some reason, and then hit the enter key? Right. Well, what happened was that ABC was cleared from the stream. We won't have any sort of garbage affecting anything here in main. You can see the menu choice that came back was the number 1, but that ABC has been cleared from this stream as well, right? So we would just go back through, switching on our choices, so on and so forth. All right, we could hit the number 3, pop that up. All right, I'm going to stop the debugger. So the importance of this was writing some functionality that guaranteed, so any function that's using cin needs to handle cin appropriately. It needs to check for failure. It could call another function to do that, right? I put this all in one function, but you could possibly call another function that handles the failure. Right, I put this all in one here. It needs to clear the string and return input. Now, if I was using maybe this exact same code here in another function, then I might call some function, say, call or handle input failure, whatever you want to call it. So if I find myself writing some of the same code over and over, and then I say, and I keep calling it, then I might want to put things in another function. But for now, here's a good basic outline. Like I said, the importance was leaving cin in a good state, that when any function that uses cin is done, you need to guarantee to the user that you leave that in a good state. You don't want to be trying to cleaning up flags or anything outside of this function, right? You need to make that guarantee to the user, right? I know that's probably hard to understand when you're writing your own standalone programs. You're thinking, well, what order does it matter what I do this in? Why do I have to do this in the same function? Well, I'm trying to get you to write this in a way where if your job as a programmer was simply to write this function and not this other code, and your function then had to work with all the other functions in here, right? If you were to try and rely on this being done somewhere else in the program, then you have written, your function is poorly written because you have not guaranteed that cin's in a good state. Somebody else would have to go in and look at your code in order to clean things up, and that would cause a problem. So I'm trying to get you to write things in a way, right, where in a function, if you're going to use cin, you're going to leave it in a good state and not depend on anything else to clean it up. I know I've said that 40 times, but it's important. All right, so hopefully this helped clear up some more of the mystery of cin and how to handle this.